And what I did was I looked him across the desk and I said, Chief, stop it. And I laid out for him 4 particularly egregious events that had taken place in the last year that he had done to me that I thought were particularly bad. And I laid them out in detail. And I said, what you've done is create a hostile work environment for me, and I'm not going to put up with it, not even 1 minute further.
Good for you.
And he looked at me kind of shocked, and he said, you got a bad attitude, son. But I said, the behavior, the things that you've done to me wouldn't be appropriate if I did them to somebody else.
Today's guest is Steve Neal, the author of Toxic Boss Blues. We got a great show for you, so stick around.
You think you're tough? You think you're tough bullying people at work and at school? You ain't tough. You're just a parasite. And ask why parasites for breakfast. And bullying today, thebullyingexposed.com. Yeah, that's right.
Today I have the author of the book Toxic Boss Blues, Steve Neal. How you doing, Steve?
How you doing, Richard? I'm a retired police officer. I was in law enforcement for nearly 30 years, and I retired at the rank of captain.
Cops always have to deal with the notion of cops don't squeal on cops. How were you able to do that and still write this book?
You know, it's really about integrity, and that's what law enforcement is all about. If you're a person who believes in principles and values, as I do, then you're going to do the right thing regardless of the circumstance. So that's a lot of what Toxic Boss Blues is. There's a lot of good leaders in the business that I was in law enforcement, but there are some who are not. And my book attacks and calls out those people who are toxic bosses and not good leaders.
Did you have any trouble with other cops, maybe calling you a rat? Did you have that problem?
I never experienced that, and I'll tell you why. My reputation was such that I was a straight shooter, and I did it the right way. And because of that, people respected me. And when I called out someone in my business, then I usually had the support and the respect of the troops. Now, the individual that I might have been calling out, I might have butted heads with them. But in the end, I survived because of my own integrity, my own reputation, and the fact that I was doing the right thing. I got into law enforcement for a reason very different than what most people do. When I was a teenager, I got in trouble with the police in my home state. And the way the police treated us during that arrest, I didn't think it was right. Once I got finished with the court process, then I made a decision that I was going to get in the law enforcement business, and I was going to treat people with respect, and I was going to do the right thing, and I was not going to do to people what it was done to me. So my personal experience put me in a position where most law enforcement officers have never been. I knew what it was like to be on the other side of that situation. So in the long run, what that did was that helped me be a better cop. Always treat people with respect and with dignity. And most of the time, if you treat people with dignity, they will respond in kind. This is the situation with law enforcement. It's kind of like every other business. Everybody in the law enforcement business, every leader is not toxic. In fact, there's some very good leaders in the law enforcement business, some of the best in the world. But there are some who don't live up to those same standards. And the way to stop a toxic boss problem in any industry depends on what the values are from the top at the business. And what I mean by that is this. If I'm at the top of an organization and I allow people to be advanced by bad behavior, then in fact what I'm doing is encouraging bad behavior. The flip side of that is if I'm at the top of any organization and I make sure that the values of our organization are dignity and respect and treating people well, if those are the things that get you advanced in the organization, then that's the behavior that you're going to get from most of the people. So the stopping this problem is really as simple as the person or persons at the top have to set the right example. And they have to make sure that when a person gets rewarded in that business, they're rewarded for the right behavior and not for toxic boss behavior. Well, it's purely and simply a question of being right. And if you're right and you're doing the right thing, then in the end, it's going to be okay. One of the things I say in my book, it's a little philosophy I've taught my children. I'm now teaching my grandchildren. That's in my book. And it's just this. When you're right, you fight. Now, if you're wrong, you need to sit down and listen and, pay attention to what other people are saying. But when you're right, then if you're a man or a woman of principle, then it's your obligation to stand up for what's right and to fight. And that's what I did all throughout my career, and that's how I built my reputation in law enforcement. Now, when you do that in any business, if you buck the system and you fight against the power, then of course there's a price to pay. The price that I paid in my business, and the price was I didn't become the chief of police. My career was going very well. I had a lot of success. I was promoted a number of times, and I had this big incident with my toxic boss. And as a result of that, my career stalled. I stayed at the last rank, my rank of captain, for 12 years, which is a long time. I was only there for 30 years. For 12 years, I never advanced past that last rank. And the reason that was is because there was a price to pay for the fact that I stood up and did the right thing. Like when my boss, my chief, asked me to do something wrong, I told him this. What I said to him, I said, "Chief, I'm sorry, I can't do that." I said, "That's not ethical behavior, and therefore I will not do this task that you asked me to do." I do not tell specifically what that particular boss asked me to do, but I always will say this when I'm asked that question. What he asked me to do in private, one-on-one in the closed office, in his closed office, was something that was not illegal by law, but it was clearly unethical. So when I heard that and he asked me to do it, my answer was simple. I said, "I'm sorry, Chief, I can't do that. I don't believe it's the right thing to do, and therefore I will not, follow that particular direction that you gave me."
Wow, good for you.
Most of the time when you're dealing with a bully, that behavior is not going to stop until you make it stop. And many times people have asked me in interviews through the years, they say, "Well, what do you do?" Kind of hope and pray that this goes away, because that particular person, when they're your boss, they control your job, they can control your promotions, they can control a lot of things about your life, assignments in your field. So most people are scared and they make a decision, just kind of hunker down and hope that it goes away.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, when you do that, that doesn't work. And I've never known it to work in any case. It didn't work in my case. And in my particular case, I sort of took that tactic because I didn't have any resources, had never dealt with it before. So this person was the chief. I had 20 years invested in the organization, and so I kind of allowed this bad behavior to go on longer than it should have. Now I know that I shouldn't have done. I would have been better off not to handle it in a little bit different way, but we had bad behavior between me and this boss for almost a year, and it was very bad behavior. It was a lot of cursing, yelling, calling me names, bad assignments, putting me in places where I didn't want to work, things like that. In fact, there were times when co-workers would come up to me and say, "What is wrong? There's clearly something wrong between you and this chief. What is wrong?" And they didn't know, of course, what I was dealing with on the backside. But because I didn't really know how to handle it at the time, I let that behavior go on for too long. But there came a point in time when I knew that I had to make it stop. That's what I did. He called me in the office one day. He started cussing me and calling me names over some little minor issue, just like he always did, just me and him behind closed doors, and I hadn't had enough of it. And what I did was I looked him across the desk and I said, "Chief, stop it." And I laid out for him 4 particularly egregious events that had taken place in the last year that he had done to me that I thought were particularly bad. And I laid them out in detail. And I said, "What you've done is create a hostile work environment for me, and I'm not going to put up with it, not even 1 minute further."
Good for you.
And he looked at me kind of shocked, and he said, "You've got a bad attitude, son." But I said, the behavior, the things that you've done to me wouldn't be appropriate if I did them to somebody else.